Good afternoon, Duke. It's good to see you.
Good to see you, Karen. I'm happy to be here with you.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you here, fellow CNVC certified trainer, actually one who's been certified since the 2000?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, so 24 years of this work.
Yes. I'm
I'm
still
gonna
learning.
just I'm gonna sit at your feet with my bag of popcorn and see what I can learn. Uh,
I think I'm on the remedial learning method. Learn slow, but trying to get it in there for sure.
exactly. Well, we're talking today because of the experience that you have with restorative process and restorative circles all over the world, and my, beginnings in it, and people out there are wanting to know about this process. So, thought it would be really fun for us to go back and forth on just some questions that I've heard, and maybe some that you've heard too through the years.
That sounds great. I'm excited to share and learn with you, and it's fun to talk about this topic. It's obviously one of my favorites, so I'm excited to be here.
So then we'll just start with, why do you practice or even believe in a restorative process?
Hmm. Um, I love the question. I think there's many answers to it. One is that it gives me hope when I see how we human beings, meaning that myself as part of that, um, have been using the same old way of dealing with conflict for literally centuries and centuries, and haven't really made significant change towards something different. And that's what restorative process for me is. It's a way of working with conflict that helps us to not only see each other as human beings, but helps us to rebuild kind of our relationships, our connections, when they've been broken or strained or in some other way damaged.
Mhm. So I'm hearing that it rebuilds community for you, that it actually rebuilds the webs of community, sewing them back together rather than maybe pulling them further apart with some kind of punishment or punitive measures.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, in sort of the social sciences studies around community well-being and what does it take for a community to have, what you might call well-being, and looking at all the different factors, education and health and economics, that all these different things, the one thing that um, is sort of connected all is the one thing that was true for all communities. It was the quality of their relationships, that's the main thing that determined their well-being.
Hmm.
And so, yeah,
Hmm.
so I think if we don't work on those things, then I don't see how we're going to live well in community together, especially as things become more divisive or, polarized and all that.
Yeah, and that really, the first question that came to mind was like, how in a world that moves so fast, how do we tend to the quality of our relationships in this, I would evaluate as a very quick world.
Yeah, it certainly is, and that I think is a challenge. And that's another thing I love about restorative processes is that it invites us to slow it down enough so that we can, really connect. And that can be challenging for people to not so much to do it, but to be willing to take the time to do it. That's the challenge sometimes. Sometimes the conflict needs to get quote unquote bad enough where people are saying, okay, I can't ignore this anymore. I can't use the old methods anymore. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I heard Marshall Rosenberg say that the two things that um, don't support conflict resolution are a lack of willingness or urgency.
Mm.
So if there's not willingness and there's an urgency in time, then conflict resolution maybe doesn't have a great chance, at least in the way that we perform it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's true. I think if we try to, I mean, the quick way to get through it is just punish someone or get violent in some form or whatever. But that has enormous consequences, as we see in the world everywhere.
Yeah. So how do you personally keep people focused on hearing each other deeply instead of maybe the compromise that they want to come in with or the outcomes that they think they're going to get?
Um, Part of that is kind of getting agreement around how we're going to work with the conflict up front. In restorative practices, we call it developing a restorative system, but it's about talking to people and getting agreement up front about how we're going to work with this conflict. I think that's a big part of it right there. And then also built into the structure of how we work is that slowing down, and that a component of it, the structure of the process, is to listen to each other and to do that in a very concrete way, which NVC is super supportive of.
Mhm, mhm.
Mm,
In my experience, which
mm,
is again a quarter or less of yours, it's it is essential. I've decided to have a shared language either learned concurrently or prior to the
hmm
restorative process, because otherwise it's not sustainable. I've worked for 4 months, 5 months on end, and people revert to the same habitual language, which just tends to stimulate and cause the same pain to come up. And I'm wondering if that's true for you as well.
mm. Well, I'm wondering if you have like an example in mind or something. That would, I think, would be really certainly help me and maybe help others who are listening to get what you mean by that language or shared language.
Yeah, so if while I'm there in the room, we'll say I do a lot of
Hmm
this over Zoom, um, both working individually with the person or in dyads or then ultimately in a circle,
hmm
I can shift language if I hear words that are inflammatory, like uh,
Yeah.
you've abused me or isolated me, or I'm always left out, these kind of words, and where someone's actually believing them, I can help shift that to a need, or a feeling. Like, what are you really feeling? You're feeling really lonely, maybe
Mm,
hurt.
mm,
Are you heartbroken or in pain? And you're really needing inclusion or to be seen. All of this is language that we carry as trainers, and it is
mm.
the nonviolent communication language. So for me, if they learn this language and they're actually committed to learning it, then the restorative process will be sustainable after I'm gone.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's like, as you said, either learning it prior or kind of while they're doing it can be really helpful. And that's, I think, where like us as facilitators, for example, modeling that kind of language and supporting people when they get caught in the judgments or whatever to kind of
Mhm.
hear below, that content information, that judgment, and hear the deeper needs or the deeper meaning below it. I think as people get practice with that through the process, for example, or a separate training, that can be that really makes a difference.
So do you because now I'm basically, we don't really require, but I'm in my packages, I put that as, this is vital that we learn this language. Do you ask for that when you contract with groups? Or are you just maybe expecting them to get it through the process?
Yeah, I think because I do a lot of international work where even just getting funding to do even the basic, experience of restorative dialogue and, some work in the field, finding funding for that is pretty hard. But I've been pleased seeing, like, often I'll work with the local group who's going to be, hopefully taking over the facilitation. I'll work with them over a period of time, and part of that will be learning how to connect to that deeper meaning or to identify needs. But then even in when we work in the communities, we often have 3 days of dialogue where they're hearing this constantly. First in the first round where I'm continuously hearing them and saying it to them. And then they get a chance to practice it through the process itself, where they're invited to listen and say back, the deeper meaning of the speaker. And as they keep hearing each other and they hear me and my colleagues kind of stepping in when they don't quite get it, they start to pick it up more and more. Is it at the
Mhm.
same level as someone who's been worked years in NBC? No, but it's amazing how far they do get and how satisfying it is for the other person, the speaker, to be heard in this way, even if it's not
Mhm.
perfect.
Yes, I'm hearing that the leaders, getting the leaders really integrated or involved through the process is what's going to help it be sustainable when you as a facilitator or me as a facilitator leaves.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
yeah, I'm pretty excited myself. We were just the nonprofit that I'm on the board of is called a Network for Nonviolent Communication, and we just wrote a grant in hopes we'll get to work with Native women in well, internationally, but specifically probably the groups that we're aware of that want this work is in the Southwest of the United States. And we want to take 10 of them through the CNVC certification process so that they can
Wow.
actually then have the language and then also learn restorative circle process as well and not call from the outside, but actually be representatives from within their community. So I'm pretty excited about that.
Yeah, that's really exciting to be able to support some of the First Nations communities or the Native American communities, different communities like that, because these practices, I mean, originally were part of their way of being, and unfortunately, because of some of the ways that they've been treated and everything, it's been hard to hold on to these practices in the face of, Western judicial system and whatnot. Um, so for them to get
Yes,
reconnected to
yes.
them sounds really thrilling.
Mhm. Yeah, actually, when I step into circle in these communities, I find it to be very comfortable. It's when the outside stories or influences come in, or we all go our separate ways back to our outside influences that I feel really concerned about it being sustainable, and the trust to be even sustainable. So what I've been asked before is are you neutral? And I have a response to that. I'm curious what your response is.
Um, I'm sorry, I'm a human being, so I can't be neutral. I'm going to have emotions about at different moments during the circle about different things that they're talking about, or some of the pain or conflicts or the way someone's expressing. Um, so part of the whole process, it's built into the process that I work with, where we take us facilitators take time to really connect with ourselves and try to identify, do we have biases? Do we have stories about one group or one person or one argument or something versus others? And, how can we transform those so we can just, again, regain our sense of the human being in front of us and see in NVC, the beautiful needs, the beautiful reasons why they have taken the actions they've taken or whatever it might be, so that I can see their human being in front of me, even when, in some cases I work with violent conflict, so sometimes I'm hearing some pretty horrendous stories. And so I
Mhm.
want to make sure that I can see that human being in front of me and not some kind of, monster or something, because then I won't be able to support him being heard just as much as, because he's needing it just as much as someone else. So that's something I'm constantly checking in with and with my co-facilitators, and also a reason why I have co-facilitators, so that if I do get triggered and need to take a step away, they can take over and keep the process moving. How about for yourself? I'd love to hear your response to that one too.
Yeah, so I consider myself omnipartial, which is
Mm,
partiality as far as equal compassion for all human beings, which means yes, I'm going to have feelings. And it doesn't look equal, but I try to make it equitable. Meaning that if someone is really in pain, I might be focusing more on them with empathy,
hmm
but then I will bring it back. And it may be during one session, this person that's in more pain has had more focus. And then, next time around, I might focus more on the other person, or it may go back to person A. So I try to bring equity in it. And yeah, I just really like the term omnipartial because like you, I don't think we can be neutral. We're human. And it's we're gonna have feelings that we're given feelings to show us, what's going on with us. What do we need? How do we
hmm
get connected to show us when we're disconnected, I believe. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. I love that omnipartial because that's the way. And I also love you using the term equity because it isn't that I'm trying to go, okay, you've got 5 minutes to talk now, you've got 5 minutes to talk and going back and forth or something. No, but it's I want to support people to have a sense of being heard and understood in the way that they're wanted. Some that might take a little longer, some it might be shorter. Um, but can I support them to really be heard and understood in the way that they're hoping to or wanting to be? Um, so that I like that term equity. Yeah, great. Thank you
Yeah.
for that.
Some of these processes, actually, I met you through a process where you came and worked with the board that I was on.
Right.
And I think it was for 4 months that we met, and then you did some follow-up care. Um, I think we were telling ourselves it was going to take one meeting, maybe a few meetings beforehand, and then one meeting, and it didn't. But what happened was all that urgency of we're not getting this work done, so we need to meet so we can get this work done. It slowed us down to realize that, oh, that work is actually secondary. What's
Mm,
more important is having connection and seeing if this is a good fit for all of us, like our own choice to be here. So after that, our board did shift and we did it with grace.
mm,
So the people who chose to roll off or leave and invite new people on, we did it in what I would call grace. So a way
sweet,
that we had heard
sweet.
each other fully and we have understanding. And I imagine if we met on the street, we'd hug each other and say hello and
Right.
uh, maybe not agree on some of, some
Sure.
certain things, um, but certainly say hello. Yeah.
Hmm.
I wanted to
Sweet.
share that.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I really appreciate hearing that, after time. Um, I think it's beautiful the potential that can happen when we start to understand each other, even if I still disagree with you, if I can see the good reasons why you did what you did, the deeper needs of why you're doing it, I can at least understand that. I can relate to that. I might not like the actions you took to get those needs met, but I can really, resonate with the needs that you were trying to meet. And when I start to do that, then it opens me up to at least have some appreciation for you as a human being and what you're trying to do, even if your
Mhm.
actions, don't work for me. And then when we do that and you see the same in me, then miracles are possible. Then it's possible to find a way forward that could work for you and for me.
Mhm. So I had asked about, sustainability, and now I'm even wondering if that's the quote, like right question, because sometimes the way a thing is set up, a board or an organization is set up, it's you don't want it to sustain in the same way. You
hmm
want
hmm
actually a deeper connection in a different way. So I'm just thinking maybe that's not the right question that I want to ask. And yet I hear, I hear companies or groups say to me, can you come do this restoration? And is it going to be sustainable? Is it going to last? So do you ever get that question?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's an important thing, for especially for communities. They want to have, increased resilience so they can deal with these things better, into the future. Um, and yeah, so I think there's a number of different things that, can be done. One I mentioned earlier, the idea of setting up a restorative system. That's about creating a set of agreements around how we're going to work with conflict going forward. That's
Mhm.
one way to make it more sustainable, is to so that and less likely that we'll just kind of fall back into old patterns, is if we set up a way, together of, okay, well, from now on, when the next conflict happens, how do we want to work with it? What kind of restorative way can we work with it? That's a great way to kind of help ensure the sustainability. Um, the other thing that I've seen is that when, it's so infrequent that we see conflict resolved in any way except through right, wrong, good, bad, some form of violence, that it's hard for people to even imagine it's possible. And then when a group kind of goes through, a restorative process and they come out the other side having a different understanding, maybe new agreements, new ways of relating with each other, I think then it's a little bit harder at least to kind of go back to, because something else is possible now. And that
Mhm.
also,
Mhm.
really helps. So like one church organization I worked with a few years ago, um, they really loved the dialogue process of, when someone speaks, getting reflected back. And so they started to bring that into other church activities and even onto their board, that when things got emotional, they would immediately agree to go into that process of really reflecting back what they're hearing and everything. And so different groups like that can sometimes incorporate in different ways, the skills that they develop in the process too.
Yeah, yeah. I love that. One of the things that that happens or I've experienced is that when people feel powerless or completely helpless, they reach towards lawyers. And
Mm-hmm.
even if we're in the restorative process, it starts to get a little messy. They go, well, it's just time to call the lawyers. And my heart at that moment stops because I'm like, oh no. I mean, not just shout out to the lawyers, nothing, I know you're
Mm-hmm.
in a system, it's nothing against the people. Um, and it doesn't, I haven't experienced working well with a restorative system.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm wondering how that is for you.
Well, yeah, I think you're looking at two different, paradigms where the punitive or retributive system that most lawyers work within, not all, but most, it's focused on, who's right and who's wrong. And then once we determine who's wrong, then there's a certain, punishment that goes along with that. Um, and that's the focus or attention of the retributive system, where a restorative system is about, is restoring the relationship, creating mutual understanding. And then out of that mutual understanding, we can look for solutions. But the focus is completely different. And it's not just figuring out who's right and who's wrong and who gets punished. It's about how do we understand each other? And then, okay, once we understand each other, okay, how do we move forward in a way that works for all of us? Understandably, it'll be different than what we did prior to that, because that one wasn't working or we wouldn't be here in the first place.
And do you also get a sense that when a person that feels powerless, that they reach towards, something like the law?
Well, it is, what we're familiar with and what we know works, even though
Mhm.
I think many, if not all of us who have gone through even, small claims court often come out very, very unsatisfied, even if we won. Um, because, often we're going in there as much to win as much to be heard as it is to win a certain amount of money or whatever it is. Um, and we definitely don't get heard or understood in that process. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
does that resonate with your experience?
Yeah, it does. It does very much so. And sometimes I feel helpless, when it's so strong from both sides, like the pain is so much that they just say, we're going to go for this direction. And especially if we've already had maybe one or two really, in my opinion, great circles, like they've met needs of connection, people have heard each other, and then we go back into activity, disconnection happens, and then it's like, well, we tried that, it didn't work, so now we're going to reach for the law. And then I have to reground myself and
Mm, mm-hmm,
ask, do you have some willingness? This is a process that maybe it will take a couple times to really trust that it's going to, that you, each time it's going to take a little courage. Each time I'm going to be vulnerable. So each time I'm pulling back a little layer, and just like a relationship,
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
in relationships, whether it's with, family or lovers or friends, you have these different layers where you hit up against edges, and um, having a dialogue, like a really authentic, courageous dialogue, is what deepens it,
mm-hmm.
my experience.
Yeah, no, I resonate with that. And I think it does, restorative practices does invite people into a place of courage, and willingness. Because it is challenging to allow yourself to open in this way. It's incredibly rewarding, and in my experience, the results are a million times better than if I do it the punitive way. But it does require some courage and some strength to be willing to stay with it when it gets kind of difficult, and it brings up some of that old pain or whatever. Um, the beauty of it is that if we stay with it, if people are willing to stay with it, often that pain gets transformed in a way that it doesn't have the same impact on them anymore after that. It can't touch them in the
Mm.
same way, which that won't happen in my experience in the punitive system.
I like how you say can't touch them, because to me it is, it's not necessarily healing trauma, and you didn't say that, but
Mm-mm.
we don't necessarily heal trauma, but we create some kind of resilience within that trauma.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
it's that, oh, here's this again, but wait a second, I have I have something else going on. I have another connection to a different strategy or a different way of facing this trauma or this stimulus.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And they also, hopefully, if they stay with it, they'll have the experience of, wow, I went up against this pain or up to this pain, and I was able to keep moving through it. And so
Mhm.
knowing that you have done that once, then it's never quite the same again. In my experience, I
Mhm.
know, with obviously we provide hopefully the kind of support that will help people to do that. Um,
Yeah, and I'm curious, since we're both on the trainer team for this upcoming IIT, and we'll have people come from all different backgrounds, and some of them with different kinds of trauma. Um, you and I know that we're going to set up some systems, but for people listening, what can we add to give them confidence that it'll be a place of maybe safety and security, trust?
hmm. Well, I think one of the things about an international intensive like that is that, one, we have a team of trainers and organizers whose, whole focus is to support and a commitment to being with, whatever comes up in themselves, whatever comes up in their participants. And we have a whole, community of participants who have also made that same commitment. And so
Mhm.
that, in and of itself is already a, helps build a strong container to hold whatever comes up. So that's for me one aspect of it. And then as you kind of, I think, mentioned or alluded to, we would also be creating some systems within our community that, to deal with conflict, to receive feedback from the participants and everybody, different things like that, so that we have something in place already. So, when conflict or other things come up, it's not like we're scrambling on the spot. We've already got something in place that we can immediately respond to what's happening. Do you have other
Yeah.
thoughts about that too, to add to that?
Yeah, I think they'll add, I mean, all of those I agree with. And also knowing, some of the people who are coming in their backgrounds, supporting trainers, their extensive experience. I feel really comfortable with
Yeah.
the team that we have and the people that are coming. But I think in addition is that there's there's a lot of choice at these trainings I've
Mm,
experienced. And what
hmm
I didn't experience in my childhood was the knowledge that I had choice. And so I think some of the personal trauma was just not that knowledge. And the first time I went to, it wasn't an IIT, but it was a family heart camp. There was this, exercise of how much choice we were going to have. And I reached towards, I'm going to be, the person with the most choice. And I was leaving one day to leave the camp to go pay a bill. And I went to one of the people that is a trainer and I considered maybe an authority figure. And I told her I was leaving. And she said, "Are you telling me? Or are you asking me? I don't understand. You have a choice." And I just burst into tears. And because I'd never had that much choice. And so
mm,
then I was like, "Oh, I guess I don't want to have that much choice." So why I bring this up for a training is that I like to also have a conversation about, you might be experiencing all this choice that maybe you see us as authority figures telling you what to
mm,
do, or you have to tell us, and want you to be comfortable with how much choice you want to have.
hmm hmm
And here's your support system so you can buddy up or talk to them if you realize that, wow, this is too much choice. I'm actually feeling insecure, like I
Right.
was, where
hmm
literally
hmm
tears came out. And I was an adult at this time.
Right, right. Yeah. Well, if we're not used to having a lot of choice and suddenly we have a ton of choice, it can be a little scary or certainly un disconcerting or something, to, oh God, how do I do this now? I've never practiced much.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that goes in line with, all of the stuff we're bringing, whether it's traumatic experiences or trigger situations, or just, maybe not being comfortable in community. So really talking about these things and bringing them out for people so that we can offer them whatever web of support we have, that I'm confident that our team will do.
Hmm. Yeah, me too. That's wonderful to hear. Yeah,
So
great.
I imagine we could talk for hours, and there's other questions, but I also know that we have other commitments, and I just want to say thanks for saying yes. And do you have any closing thoughts that you want to add?
Um, No, I guess I mean just that I imagine that you and I, amongst many other topics, will be talking about restorative practices at the New Mexico International Intensive and giving people a chance to experience and practice, with some of the processes that are part of that. And I'm excited to be sharing that with you and with our team, and really looking forward to having more people who are excited about restorative practices, because I think just looking around the nation or around the world, it's easy to see how much we need a different way of working with conflict than what we've been doing for so very long. So the more of us that are out there with sharing the word and having experience, the more thrilled I am about that.
Yeah, I agree with that too. I'm also pretty excited to share what I know and to practice. It's so much fun to just practice with different people and
hmm
to see the process work. I was going to say one other thing that slipped my mind, but that's what happens. So for now, I'll just say this conversation continues, and thank you, Duke, for chatting with me today.
Yeah, thanks. It was really fun. It's a fun topic, and it was great to talk to you about it.
Likewise. Right.
Take care, Karen.